All right, as you can probably tell, we're going to talk about bullets and cartridges. I have a lot of conversations every year with individuals, especially guys who are kind of new to the long range game and maybe heading out west for the first time, and help them make a decision on what caliber and maybe what bullet is right for their application. So let's just talk about that today, but before we do, let me show you something. Check that out. This comes off of a mule deer I just killed a week ago. Some of you might have seen that video. Everybody that sees this buck and sees the antlers like this off their head, you know, not in a picture or video, is just like, that thing is bigger than I thought. I need your help on this though. I put a Facebook post out there asking, and we had a lot of varied opinions, but this fourth or third was broke off when I shot it, but obviously it was there at one time. It actually looks like he's rubbed right here. It actually looks like he might have got it caught in a fence or something, and I'm not sure, maybe broke it off there, maybe this was a separate wear, but it would seem like this wear mark in here and this break probably were all happened at the same time. The question is, should I build this tine back? I have built a handful of tines back for friends and customers, and using a tine build epoxy kit, and they've always turned out great. I've done a few little repairs for myself, but the question is on a deer of this caliber. So right now as he sits, he goes 205, and with this tine matching this over here, we estimate him to be around 216. If it was a 165, 170 deer, I'd probably leave it alone. But, I wouldn't really have too much of a question, should I build it back or not. But being a deer of this caliber, should we put him, this is probably a once in a lifetime deer, especially for something this big and this typical. Should I put it back or should I leave it? Leave me a comment, let me know what you think. What would you do? Anyway, all right, so this deer I shot. For those of you who did not watch the video, I just kind of did the video. I had some shots of this hunt. There was 4 of us. We went 4 for 4 in 3 days. And I shot this deer with a 7 PRC, shooting this little 175 ELDX bullet at 760 yards. I hit him double lung. We were shooting downhill a little bit. I hit him right behind my crosshairs. I honestly have never hit a deer or an animal that far, that precise behind my crosshairs. I think if I would have been shooting at a golf ball, I think I would have hit it. I hit it right behind the crosshairs, and we were shooting downhill a little bit, so it came out through his heart. Plus the bullets also got a little arch to it. So came out through his heart, and he was on his feet. He took off running as hard as he could, and he was down in probably 3-4 seconds. I went to rack another round in, and David was hunting with me. As I'm trying to rack another round in, before I ever got the bolt closed, David says he's down. So that little 175 ELDX did its job, put him down very, very fast, and it was a great hunt. I'll show you the rifle that I shot him with. Talk about that for just a second. This is actually my son's gun. He just turned 13 recently, but this is a Sequence Precision Element rifle. This has a short 22-inch barrel on it with the muzzle brake. The muzzle brake adds probably about 3 inches, so it's probably about a 25-inch total length of a barrel on there. But with that shorter barrel and that 7 PRC round, you're not going to get crazy velocities. And especially when I went to work up the load for this, my son was, I think, 12 when I set this gun up for him. I wanted something that shoots really easy for him as well. So the velocity that I'm actually getting out of this rifle is, I believe, only 2,750 feet per second with that 175 ELDX bullet. But it was more than enough to put that deer down at 760 yards. We've shot this rifle out to 950 yards, I believe, and it was shooting phenomenal. It's shooting easy. That the recoil is so controllable on it that when I went and shot that deer, it recoiled, I pushed it forward, and I watched the bullet hit. I watched the deer buckle. So that was super nice. So you don't have to be screaming fast to kill stuff at long range. The BC of a bullet is pretty high, and that helps that helps a ton. But yeah, this is a little element rifle. I believe this rifle, just the bare rifle, weighs like 5.5 pounds. So without a scope and a muzzle brake on it, it feels like almost feels like a kid's gun. Feels like a toy almost. But they're sweet little rifles. If you've watched the previous video where I talk about, or where I say the story about the deer and kind of narrate the whole thing, my buddy David shoots a deer at 320 yards with this exact same rifle, except it was a 300 PRC. I actually had not set up a 300 caliber or a 300 PRC or a 30 caliber in the element up till that point, and I was a little curious on what the recoil is going to be like on such a light rifle, but it was very controllable and very manageable, and yeah, it's a phenomenal little gun. But anyway, enough on the rifle. Let's talk about bullets and cartridges. Okay, so the first thing, let's just talk about some different cartridges that I think are worth talking about today, the more popular ones. There's, of course, a whole bunch of them I'm not going to talk about, but the more popular ones today, the more supported ones, I should say, I guess. We'll start with a baby, and that is the 6.5 PRC. This round is a great little round. It's a flat shooting little round. Most of the time when you're shooting something this small, you're going to be shooting a 143 or a 147, somewhere in that. Berger has some bullets in the 140 grain. I would try to stay at 140 grain and up just because the BC of the bullet is a lot better. But this is a 147 grain bullet. The BC of this bullet, this is a Hornady ELDM bullet. Now, M stands for match, and a lot of people think you can't shoot match bullets for hunting, but these little ELDM bullets have proven themselves over and over and over to be a great little hunting bullet. But the BC of this bullet is 697. It's .697, the G1 BC. The G7 BC of this bullet is .351. But anytime you have a bullet that's getting close to touching 700, even 600 and up, it's considered really good. But man, when you have a small bullet like that that's touching almost .7 out of a little round like this, that's why this little 6.5 PRC has got a lot of hype. Now, here's my 10 cents on the PR, the 6.5 PRC. If you're hunting out west and you're doing it a fair amount, and you're shooting mule deer sized game and bigger, personally wouldn't set one up. They're great for whitetails, they're great for antelope, they're great for lightweight rifles that are like sheep rifles, or maybe you're going on a mountain goat hunt, something like that, where you're wanting the ultimate lightweight build. This little 147 is going to have less recoil than, say, this 175 out of the 7 PRC. And so it's going to be just a little bit more forgiving on recoil and a little bit more forgiving maybe on accuracy, especially if you're a newer shooter. However, I would stay on the smaller end of game with that round. Is there people that are shooting elk with them? Yep, there is. Is there a lot of room for error? Not really. And so that's why I kind of steer away from the 6.5 line when it comes to trying to have a round that does a lot of different things very well. If you're staying on the smaller end of big game, it's a great round. But if you want that one round that kind of does a lot of different things, I wouldn't really say that it's your rifle. If you're the guy that has a 6.5 PRC, a 7 PRC, a 300 PRC, maybe a 300 rum, like if you're the kind of guy that just likes to have a lot of different rifles and likes to have the perfect application for every different species, then the 6.5 might fit into your gun cabinet. You know, when it comes to an antelope hunt, this is perfect. When it comes to maybe a whitetail hunt where you have to take some longer shots, perfect. I've shot different animals with 6.5 PRC. I shot my biggest Pennsylvania buck came with a 6.5 PRC shooting a 140 Berger. I shot him at 300 and some yards, and he went 50 yards and was down. So it did the job really quickly. So that's my 10 cents on the 6.5 PRC. All right, let's go up to the 7 PRC. This is the 7 PRC. It's just slightly bigger, as you can see, than the 6.5, a little taller. I think the case diameter and the base is the same. But now you're jumping up to a .284 caliber. I didn't mention the 6.5 PRC is a .264 caliber. The 7 PRC being a .284, so it's a 7mm caliber. Personally think the sweet spot for this round is a 175 or 180 grain bullet. I personally don't think that it really has the powder capacity to not to stabilize, but to get the velocity that I like to see out of it with a 195. Hornady advertises this round to be a 3,000 feet per second round. And to be honest, I have not had a single 7PRC with a 175 that I have found a good node at 3,000 feet per second or higher. They've all been, like I said, my son's rifle, 2750, that shorter barrel. That's just such a forgiving little round, or forgiving little spot, forgiving little rifle, and it loves it right there. So I would probably say with the 175 ELDX bullet, you're going to live more around 2,900 feet per second with your average powders. Now, there are powders that you can buy that, you know, if you're at chasing speed, that you can get more, but if you're shooting like H1000 or Retumbo, out of that 170, with that 175, you're going to live somewhere in that 2,900 feet per second with a 24-inch barrel, and maybe a little less with a 22-inch barrel. So it's a phenomenal little round. Here's what I would say about the 7PRC. If you're the kind of guy that hunts in the eastern states, that climbs in a tree stand once in a while, and you go out and you do an antelope hunt, mule deer hunt, you do some elk hunting, the 7PRC is, I say, not overgunned in a tree stand and not undergunned out west, especially if your shots are going to be 800 yards and in. It's a really solid little round that kind of does everything pretty good. I would say for the eastern hunter, for the guy who's going out west that just wants to spend his money on one rifle, get to really know that rifle, to be able to shoot forgiving. As I said earlier, I was able to spot my impact because the recoil is low, so there's some benefits when it comes to that. That 7PRC kind of checks all the boxes. I have sold quite a few of those since they have come out. All right, so now let's talk about the 28 Nosler. This is a round that if I had to say that there was one round that I would say is the king of long range when it comes to hunting, I personally would say it's the 28 Nosler. It shoots really flat. It drifts as little in the wind as any round that you're going to find on the mountain, especially if you're shooting this 195 grain Berger bullet. It has a BC of .755, so it is extremely forgiving. It is as forgiving as you can get. If you're going to miss with this rifle, with this round, you're going to miss. Let's say you make a bad wind call. If you're going to miss because of a wind call with this, you're going to miss with everything else. So I would not say the 28 Nosler is a great round to drag into the woods in the east, you know, where you're shooting deer to 100, 200 yards. Could you? Of course you could. But it's very loud. It needs a muzzle brake, which makes it even louder. I personally put muzzle brakes on everything. But the 7PRC, the 6.5 PRC, you know, you can shoot those just fine with no muzzle brake, which makes a better tree stand gun. The 28 Nosler, I just don't shoot it without a muzzle brake. It just has a lot of recoil. But it throws this little 195 at, give or take, 3,000 feet per second. That coupled with a BC of .755 just makes it super flat. If you want to talk, let's talk about drop a little bit. The 7PRC, I don't have my numbers in front of me, but I know them in my head pretty good. The 7PRC at our elevation here, which is in Pennsylvania at about 1,200 feet, at 1,000 yards on average, will drop somewhere around 24 minutes of angle. The 28 Nosler will drop somewhere around 20 MOA. The 7PRC will drift approximately probably 48, 49 inches at 1,000 yards with a full 10-mile-an-hour wind. The 28 Nosler will drift somewhere around 41, 42 inches in the same conditions. So it's extremely flat, and it's extremely forgiving when it comes to shooting in the wind. Again, this round, in my opinion, is a Western long-range big game round. I love it. It's probably my favorite round for just toting that rifle out west. You can shoot far, it hits like a hammer, and it's forgiving. All right, so let's jump up to a very popular round. It's been around for longer than any of these other rounds, and that is the 300 Win Mag. There's still a lot of guys who love the 300 Win Mag, and I don't hate on the 300 Win Mag. It's an okay round. However, the 300 PRC, in my opinion, kind of takes over the 300 Win Mag for a couple reasons. One is the 300 Win Mag, oftentimes manufacturers, especially some of your more popular manufacturers who are producing, $500 to $1,500 rifles, the barrel twist on them doesn't stabilize the really heavy bullets that I like to see guys shooting for long range. In my opinion, a 30 caliber needs to be shooting a bullet that weighs a minimum of about 212 grains. Like the Hornady makes one's 212 grain ELDX bullet right here. This little round. It has a BC of 0.66. So it has a really good BC. If you, just to compare it and help you understand why I say it needs to have a bullet weighing over 200, let's just say 200. But for what I set up, 212 is as light as any bullet that I typically use. I do have a couple different bullets here in the 30 calibers. This is a Berger bullet, 185 grain Berger bullet, the VLD hunting bullet, and it has a BC of 0.55 at 185 grains. So of any of these bullets that I've showed you, this has a BC of 0.55. This little 147 ELDM bullet has a BC of 0.697, so way higher than this little 185. So when it comes to, we were talking about wind drift, when it comes to wind drift, this is where these bullets in like the 300 Win Mag, it's pretty popular to buy factory ammo off the shelves in a 300 Win Mag that have 185 grain bullets. This has a BC of 0.55 in a VLD Hunter. This bullet at 1,000 yards in a 10 mile an hour wind, full value wind, will drift approximately somewhere in the 60s, probably somewhere around 65 to 68 inches of wind drift. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I've used these in the past that I know about where that's at. All right, just because I have two boxes beside each other here of Berger 185 bullets. And when you're buying bullets, you can't just look at the weight. You have to make sure, especially with Berger, you have to make sure that they're the right ones. This was VLD hunting. These bullets are called Classic Hunters. Check out the difference in the BC. The BC of this bullet is 0.558. In the VLD Hunter, the Classic Hunter is 0.53. So the BC, you can see when you even look at it. I don't know how well you can see it because I'm sitting far away, but the one in my left hand is the VLD, very low drag hunting bullet. This is the Classic. You can see that this one is fatter all the way up into the ogive than this one is, which just means it's going to have more drag. So look out for some of that. But in my opinion, if you're shooting a 30 caliber rifle and you want to shoot long range, anything over 500-600 yards and out, try to find a bullet that's over 200 grains if possible, or do a custom load or hand load. All right, the 300 PRC is, I would say, the most popular 30 caliber long range rifle in the moment. Most of the manufacturers that are chambering around the 300 PRC round understand that it is a long range rifle. They're giving you the barrel twist that you need to stabilize some of these heavier bullets. And you can jump up to a 212, a 215, you can shoot a 220 grain. Here's a 220 grain ELDX bullet. Phenomenal little bullet and has a BC of 0.655. So you're jumping up there in the middle, in the mid sixes, and that's really good. The 300 PRC for the guys who need a 30 caliber rifle and want to stick with 30 caliber is a phenomenal round. If we're talking about drop and wind drift, it's not going to be quite as good as the 28 Nosler. The 300 PRC say we're shooting a 212, 220, 215, all of them are going to be about the same when it comes to drop and drift, just because the 220 is going to be going a little slower than, say, the 212. So the 220 has a little higher BC than the 212. So they all kind of weigh each other out. The 220 probably hits a little bit harder than the 212, but not much. However, the drop on this round will be about 23 to 24 MOA. You're actually going to be very close to the same as you are in the 7 PRC shooting this little 175 ELDX bullet. However, this round's going to hit a little bit harder. If you're going to put a shot you know, in the guts or the liver or somewhere like that, that 300 rounds probably going to be a little bit more forgiving than one of the smaller rounds. So that might be why you would consider shooting something with a little bigger bullet. However, all these rounds are phenomenal rounds. So you're going to have to kind of choose for yourself what application you want to use it for. Are you going to be using it as an all-around rifle? Are you going to be using it for just a Western rifle? You know, are you going for mostly elk? Are you going for a lot of, you know, the smaller big game and then an occasional elk? All that makes a difference. And so hopefully this will help educate you just a little bit on the BC of the bullets, the different rounds, and just remember that the lower the BC of the bullet, the more drop and the more drift you're going to have, even if it's coupled with velocity. You could literally have a 28 Nosler shooting this round, the 195 at say 2,800 feet per second, and have the 300 Win Mag shooting this 185 over here with the low BC at 3,000 feet per second. But the 28 Nosler over here going slower because of that BC will outshoot that speed every single day of the week. So hopefully you understand this just a little bit better if you're fairly new to the game of long range, and this can help you understand and make a better decision on what's right for you and what you want to spend your money on your next long range hunting rifle.